Welcome everyone to the House Ways and Means Committee. Today is March 18th, 2021. We'll get started on a few bills. Today we have House Bill 1355, Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you to Chairwoman Kaiser and the rest of the committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, and I'm requesting a favorable report on House Bill 1355, the Education Recovery Act of 2021. And the reason I late filed this bill is I didn't fully unpack this issue until late in the session. And so I'm grateful that I'm having an opportunity to have a hearing on this bill. I had a meeting with a number of special needs parents, special needs students in my district. And through their conversation with me, I unpacked something that I found alarming was we have a number of students that are special needs that are either meeting graduation requirements or aging out of the system. But unfortunately, to circumstances beyond all of our controls, they've lost an entire year of that vital in-person services that these students desperately need. The concern was so great that I spoke to several parents whose children are deliberately trying to fail their senior year not to meet graduation requirements. And so I simply thought, what can we do? I mean, we do a lot of good work in this body, and this is something that's in front of us. I think we can definitely address, and I want to tackle it. But I wanted to make sure that this was, inclusionary. And so I started to unpack other areas of education where other students in different situations are facing this exact same crisis. So I wanted to expand this to not only special education students, but students with disabilities, students from families where English is not the primary language, students who are eligible for free and reduced price meals, students who are attending a school that is eligible for a concentration of poverty grant, and struggling learners is defined in 5226 of the education article who require transitional supplemental instruction. The scope of this is very small. It is just for the 2021-2022 school year. And it's opt-in only. So if a student doesn't want to pursue this, they don't have to, but for the students who really need it. And the last thing I'll say is I know there's some concern about a physical note, and it's a legitimate concern. I'm hopeful that there may be some resources available because of with some students unenrolling from public schools and there being a freeze on the funding for schools, there might be some wiggle room there. And of course, if there's any Relief Act funds towards education, because I feel that this would be one of the this would be some of the intentions of that Relief Act funding to supplement these kids' education. So with that, thank you for the opportunity, and I humbly request a favorable report on this bill.
Thank you. Questions? Delegate Ebersol.
Thanks for your patience there for a second. I opened a window I didn't mean to open. So yeah, there's no fiscal note on this bill yet. And are you aware of Delegate Guyton's bill, which is similar, but perhaps not quite as broad scoped, House Bill 724? Have you had a look at that one? If not, I'm asking you because if not, I'll tell you. But if you have, then I'd be curious your thoughts on that a little bit.
I am, and I support that piece of legislation too. I put this bill in without being fully read in on her bill, so I wasn't trying to compete with her bill. And to be very frank, I don't care how this problem gets solved as long as we as a body find a way to solve it, whether it's my bill or her bill or a combination therein. I just want to make sure we're taking care of these kids.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, just a couple other inquiries. So looking at her bill really focuses on just students who are transitioning. Not, you have a rather extensive list of 6 groups of students here. And we've had difficulty getting an exact number, but initially the fiscal note on her bill was over $50 million in the next 2 years. And when she attempted to dial it back a bit and say it's just students who are transitioning out of vocational programs, We still got an indication of over $23 million for this. Yours is much more extensive. Do you have any idea? Has anyone given you an idea of what the cost of this could be if a large number of these students decided to follow through on this?
No. I question the physical note, even on delegate guidance bill, just because, again, we don't know. It's hard to estimate how many students would want to repeat. My estimation on my conversations is really the students. I think certainly the students that are special needs, you're going to see a high rate of students who want to repeat. But I think when you go to English language learners and some of the other groups are included, I think you're going to see those numbers drop, in some cases very significantly.
Yeah, and hers mostly focused on special ed, but the fiscal note was still rather large.
Right.
So I have some concerns. I understand yours, and they're valuable, and I appreciate you bringing the bill. I appreciate Delegate Guyton's hard work on behalf of the special needs students in the state. I just wonder if we have the advanced research. This is a high numbered bill, and obviously the fiscal note writer hasn't even been able to wrap their head around it.
Right.
Alistair has been working really hard for us to try to get some information, and it's difficult for us, but it seems very high, and that's all I'll add. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Delegate Ebersol, and I completely agree with you. And I'm hopeful, at least optimistic, there might be a mechanism to maybe use some of the education dollars in the Relief Act to help offset the physical note. But it's a legitimate concern, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, thank you to the bill sponsor for bringing this forward. I'll preface this with this committee doesn't seem to mind too much about fiscal notes when it's this impactful of a legislation. I will say that in my district, especially, I have parents who are approaching me. And as we all know, for some of these IEPs and other plans, in-person learning is critical. They have lost so much because that's the only way that they can learn. They can't do this over a proxy or through a computer or a tablet. And the parents are gravely concerned that, one, they're not going to graduate, and that, two, that summer school or extended classroom study towards the end of the year is not going to be available. So they're not getting clear answers from the school board because, frankly, they don't know if they have the resources. So my question is, if this bill is able to get passed and the resources are going to be there, can the school district then say to these parents, yes, we can give you 100% answer that your student will be able to continue maybe in the summer or even in next year so that they can effectively graduate with the grades that they need?
And thank you, Delegate Hornberger. I believe that's the case. I think this would definitely alleviate some of the unknown going into the next school year. And especially right now, the unknown is right now. And what I mean by that, I touched on this in my testimony. We have kids right now that fall in these categories that are deliberately failing their senior year so they can recapture that year of in-person learning. And that's a fact. And that's alarming. And no child in the state of Maryland, no matter the circumstance, should feel like they need to deliberately fail to meet their education goals. And again, this is no one's fault. There's nobody pointing a finger in the situation. We have the ability, I believe there's some extra resources out there. I think it's right there in front of us to really do something good. And not for me, this doesn't affect my son's 6, this doesn't affect him. But it does affect so many kids across the state in every corner of the state. Thank you, Delegate, for your question.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. Delegate Guyton. You're muted, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again, and thank you so much, Delegate Griffiths, for bringing this bill. I really appreciate also the work that our subcommittee on special education and early childhood has done on this issue. So I want you to know that this is something, and I appreciate Delegate Ebersol's mention of that too, that this is something that I believe the entire committee recognizes as a problem, particularly at the end of the schooling experience for these kids who haven't had what they need to graduate to be successful. So I do feel feel like there's a will to do something about this. At least I hope so. I also want to say, I certainly don't see you as stepping on my toes on this in any way, because I don't want you to get that impression. I know that in supporting our kids with disabilities, you and I are partners and good friends. So I appreciate it. And I'm trying to actually grapple with the difference between my Bill 724 and the bill that you're presenting to us today. Do you mind just telling me if you have any idea of the differences in the numbers of the groups of kids that are going to be affected with this bill? Because it's still we're trying to wrap our heads around the fiscal note, which I agree with you, doesn't make a lot of sense given that Virginia has the same bill and it's 10% of what our fiscal note was given to us, it looks like. So do you have any idea of what you would expect this to come in at? And would you be willing at all to scale it back to look more at the kids at the end of their high school careers? So 2 questions there.
Sure. I'm willing to, again, the core of the issue, the core problem I'm trying to solve here is primarily the kids graduating and aging out. Now, obviously, I don't want to limit my bill, if it's the will of the committee, to give more opportunity to more kids. But as long as we find a solution to the core of the problem that I'm trying to fix, I'm wide open to any solve. This is an area that I'm still new to trying to help pass legislation for. But this is an area this committee has a great deal of experience in. So I certainly yield to the experience of the committee and how we do this. So I'm willing to modify it, wherever it takes us, whatever we need to do to solve this problem, I'm in. As far as the physical note, again, I think Delegate, you and I are aligned that, because it's unknown, because it's unprecedented, if I would, if I was the folks presenting the fiscal note, I would err on the high side too. It's the responsible thing to do. I just can't see a mechanism where it would be. And then your final question, where the difference is, again, the difference is the scope and the folks that include. It includes more special needs students, IEPs, 504s, English language learners, students that are, low income as defined by being on free and reduced meals, things of that nature. But again, however we get there, I'm in.
Thank you, Delegate. Last question, Delegate Ebersol, and Delegate Hornberger, you get your hands up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to get a clarification here to be sure I'm correct. A lot of talk has been about some seniors that might need another year to graduate or a little more time. But if I read the bill correctly, this is for any student of any age, which means that school systems will be dealing with students for an additional year for the next 10 to 12 years. So this fiscal note would extend out into the 2030s in this case. Do I have that right?
That's correct. And again, I wanted to err on the side of a wide net and lots of opportunity, and then work backwards. I want to try to find a way to extend the most opportunity to the most folks in every situation conceivable within this. And, if it's the will of the committee to pare it down, I understand and work through the problem, but I didn't want to just limit it to, a couple of groups when there might be some other groups that, may not, that I'd like to contemplate who may need these services. And if there are other mechanisms that develop to solve issues for these other kids, I support that. And again, I'm not going to stand here and say my bill is the end all be all solution, but hopefully together we can find a solution to help these kids.
Excuse me. Thank you. Seeing other questions. Thank you, Delegate Griffith. We'll go to the only person signed up to speak, which is Trent Stroup.
Thank you, sir. My name is Trent Stroup. I'm a parent of a special needs daughter. My daughter's name is Addie Stroup. She is currently 16 years old, goes to a special needs school in Baltimore City called St. Elizabeth. She has been home for the entire year. The virtual learning for her did not work at all. At one point, she asked me a question, and I had to go to my dad. She said, "Dad, I'm a." I had to go to my wife. I didn't understand what that meant. She was asking me, "I want water." She's lost so much speech because she was home. We can't even understand what she's saying anymore. It's getting very hard for us to communicate with our own special needs daughter. So we're begging you guys to please extend her schooling another year, since she lost an entire year not being in school. Luckily, I'm a personal trainer, so I've been working with her on physical therapy, but she's lost anything at school for the whole year. She hasn't had any IEP goals have been worked on or achieved at all for the last 12 months. It's been a complete standstill. So luckily, she's got 4 more years in school before she ages out, but she's lost that entire year. And for her, it's going to be detrimental, because even though she's 16, she's really like a 3-year-old. And we are hoping that there's going to be some sort of relief for her. We know there's been a lot of, COVID relief in bills and in financial money and things that have been given to families. But unfortunately for people like my daughter, Addie, there's been no relief at all through this COVID pandemic. And I feel so bad for it. It just makes me tear up and feel so sorry for people like her that are special needs that have lost all this time through this trying period. So I'm begging you to really consider this bill and pass this bill to extend for people like our daughter Addie that really desperately needs these services and another year to be picked up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Straub, and thank you for sharing your story with us. Any questions for the witness? Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for being here. It is difficult to share these stories, but it's really valuable for us to hear. And I've heard a lot of stories like yours this year also from my constituents and other parents throughout the state. Can you tell me what is the process right now, or are you familiar with it? If you felt that your child, which it seems that you do, your daughter, is really suffering and is not getting what she needed this year, but needs extra remediation or compensatory services, do you know what the process is for your family to get those?
We've reached out to people. We've reached out to people at St. Elizabeth's, and we actually are reaching out to the people at the DDA, the Disability Administration, to find out what we can do to try to make up for some of the things that we've lost over the past year. And so far, we have not made any headway in any of those areas.
So if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I think the point of that is parents do not know what to do about this issue. And that is why it's so immediate for us to step in with emergency measures to try to give guidance to the school system. Otherwise, we're just trusting all of the 24 jurisdictions and the state Board of Education to just do the right thing here. And right now, going into the last 2 or 3 months of school for these kids, they're basically doing nothing to address this issue other than causing parents to go into due process and file lawsuits. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but I think that's an important point. Parents have no way to know how to fix this problem. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing for House Bill 1355. We'll turn to House Bill 1357. Delegate Clark. This is a sponsor-only bill. Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Delegate. What brings me here today is HB 1357. It's a Calvert County Board of Education bill that has to do with public comment at the public meetings. Back in, I guess it was late January, early February, I had some Zoom meetings with some constituents of Calvert County who had concerns that they were unable to voice any public comment to the Board of Education during the unfortunate pandemic that we had for the last year. Beginning back in March of 2020, the board started to require that all comments be emailed and posted publicly at a later date, which was fine. I understand that it's a lot of confusion with Zoom meetings. I mean, I think we all got educated tremendously well on how Zoom meetings work very quickly. Members of the public repeatedly requested email address to send emails to the board, and it was a very confusing process that was not easily accessible. There was a ton of confusion on how to could be shared with the board, how the process worked. Many people were sending emails to individual members of the board for a lack of understanding and purpose. Never saw comments or posted publicly. Some of the posted emails included things such as BOE website does not provide an email address to submit public comment. I hope that I have the right person. I've given my name and contact information. Please let me know if I should contact someone else. I'm not sure the best way to ensure parents' comments are shared with the board. Surprisingly, the loudest voice wasn't necessarily the parents. It seems that what research that we could do on the emails, the number one source of the issues were actually teachers, followed by parents, students, bus drivers, librarians, and other school staff. And also the unions were having issues with being able to discuss issues with the board. After discussion with constituents and the members of the board, I received no indication that change in the actions was going to be expected. Therefore, therefore, to ensure the public had equal input at the meetings, I submitted this bill, 1357. Now, keep in mind that my previous political world was county commissioner in Calvert County for 12 years. And in Calvert County, we have prided our school and our school boards for years and years. So please don't take this bill as any direct front from me, as any kind of a shot or any kind of criticism of the Board of Education. For many, many, many years, and if you probably look at even to this day, Calvert County has funded their Board of Education and their public school systems at a higher maintenance of effort than probably a lot of counties in the state of Maryland, and we've been very fortunate to be able to do that. But unfortunately, I think that from the scare and the excitement of all the COVID issues, that sight was lost that the board needed, through the superintendent and the school system, needed to be able to make their Zoom meetings so that the public could make comments at them. In their own policy, board policy, they require public comment to the terms of 3 minutes and up to 5 minutes if you're speaking for an organization of up to 10 people. But on the other end of it, they have an exception that says there's no exception to this policy. However, the board by majority may vote to temporarily suspend all or part of the policy. Now, a year suspension is not a temporary suspension. To their credit, the board started meeting back in public on March the 11th of this month, and they started allowing public comment, which I'm very happy they did that, and it was something that I urged. So they kind of immediately fixed it. So what this bill does is it does two things. This bill just simply states that the Board of Education will allow public comment at all their meetings under the policy that they have here of 3 minutes per person, up to 10 people. And the bill also says that they will start to do written minutes or do recorded minutes of the comments of the individual parents, teachers, students, whoever come to make these public comments. Because in the past, according to what I have research I've done, they haven't been doing that. They haven't been taking minutes of the public comment. Now, all of us know that when we have public comments in our committee meetings, we always take some notes from people that, because we can't remember them all. And so we can address them, and they should do that too, so that they can address the citizens back in the way that they feel they should do that. I know that in these day and time of COVID and the way of the world with all the anxiety and thing that's going on, that there's people that abuse their ability to make public comments and say things they shouldn't say and use words they shouldn't say. And, you know, for me, that's just pull the plug, cut them off type of thing. I don't dispute that one bit. I think this is a very common sense approach to this issue. The board has, I called the board and asked them if they could write a letter of support for these changes, which they decided not to do. I understand that. As an elected official, always hated when Tony O'Donnell used to tell me what I had to do. And I always rebelled back at him. And I understand that. But I think when we have a school board that's nonpartisan and is elected in a nonpartisan way, that there's expectations to the public that these issues should be there, and to make the school system better, and to help the parents and the students be able to understand what's going on. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, in the last year, just in emails from parents, they received 208 emails from parents, 268 from teachers, 5 from students, and about 5 or 6 from bus drivers. So, you know, there was a lot of information that was needed to be put out, and it wasn't disseminated very well. And I think that this bill will help them and put them on notice that it needs to be done. I know that you received comments from other delegates and elected officials in the Calvert County area. You know, some of us are against it, some of us are for it. There again, I hate to see this. I hate to see a nonpartisan board be divided politically, but you know, that, I guess that's the way of the world. And as you all know, I'm the guy that, I'm not a rabble rouser. I mean, half the time you don't even know I'm sitting in the back of the room, because I understand the process, and I want to be part of the solution, not part of the uproar. So I would appreciate a positive comment or on this bill, a positive vote. I understand the situation you folks may be in, but all I can tell you is think about if this was in your county or in your Board of Education, where you would be on this. Again, just to put the positive out there, this is absolutely no negative shots at anyone on the Board of Education in Calvert County or the superintendent. It's just an issue that I feel needs to be fixed. And that's why I approached and asked it to be brought out of rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Clark. Let me ask a quick question before.
Sure.
Thank you, Delegate Clark, for bringing this bill, by the way. And you know, we know you don't speak often, but when you do speak, we listen. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Before the pandemic occurred, was the board taking public comment?
Yeah, yes, they were. Yes.
Okay. Now, and then the pandemic is during the pandemic, they were taking public comment, but it was they were reading it through writing, and then they read it over Zoom publicly and made it available publicly.
Well, in some cases, we had people that said they sent emails and never got responses.
Got it.
And,
Okay.
you know, it turned into a Herculean process. You know, and when I first spoke to the chair of the Board of Education, she conveyed to me she was concerned about doing public comments on Zoom because she didn't feel it was the secure system, and worrying about people taking it over and things like that. And I did suggest to her that if the school system didn't have the IT expertise to do that, you know, she could call, or I would call the county for them, and their IT people would come over and help them, because that's how they operate their county.
Yeah, I know it's difficult using Zoom and how to make it secure. So that's a lot a lot of other entities have done that in the past. But now, as you already alluded to or stated, now they have an in-person public comment. Is that correct?
They have instituted their first face-to-face public meeting on March the 11th. They can put that in and started that back up. But they do 10 people at 3 minutes apiece. And at their first meeting, they had
8 people.
They had 8 people speak, but there was 14 parents, and there was evidently one of the social study groups of teachers or something sent in some stuff. But they had about requests for 14 people, and they have a new policy and process of how to sign up ahead of time, kind of like we do with our committees and things like that, which I'm for doing that. I just want to make sure that as we go forward in the future, that future boards of education understand how important the public comment is. And in my way of thinking, when I put this bill in, this was a win-win for everybody because it helped them show a positive movement on public comment going forward in their commitment to doing public comment in the future by putting it in legislation that there had to be public comment. Obviously, they took it the other way and took exception to it, but that's their prerogative to do that. It's just my way of thinking in my mindset.
Fair enough. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Delegate. I think we have 6 questions in front of us. Delegate, let me know if you actually have your hand up or if it's not supposed to be up right now. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so we're gonna go to our first question, which I believe is Delegate Hornberger, and then we'll go to Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Delegate, I appreciate you bringing this transparency bill to our committee. My question, I know some jurisdictions have struggled with the transition to digital, but it sounded to me in your testimony like there was some violations of the Open Meetings Act. And I was just wondering if there was an inquiry put in or if the commissioners brought up that they were, potentially violating Open Meetings Act, because it sounds like they were continuing to meet. There just wasn't any transparency open to the public or ability to comment. So if you could just.
Well, my comment to that is that I don't think that there was any purposely violations to the Open Meetings Act. I think that in their bylaws, it said they could temporarily suspend any part of their working policy for a short period of time. Now, I guess you could debate whether 12 months was a short period of time or not.
Yeah, well, sometimes these bylaws aren't in accordance with state law.
Yeah, I don't think that there was any purposely acts of open meeting against the Open Meetings Act that were purposely done. I never have thought that, and that's not part of any of my reasoning to do this. I mean, it was basically just to put this bill in so that everybody understood, and going forward, that in Calvert County, that we take a special emphasis on our school system and our local board of commissioners, and that public comment is an important part of things for our citizens.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the bill, and while you say that there's nothing particular targeted, I noticed that you have a whole list of things that they must take questions on. And then in the 7th one, you just say any other matter. Why have you selected those 6 at the top as if they're things that perhaps it almost suggests they're not listening on those issues? And then the other question I have, I'll let you answer them kind of together, is it says that any member who shows up, I know that my county has a policy where they randomly draw names to keep the meeting of a reasonable length. It looks like anybody. So if 100 people showed up, that would be without any breaks, 300 minutes of testimony, which is 6 hours. I'm wondering if you feel if that was your intent.
No, my intent was up to 10. And that's what they have in their policy. In the bill, President Board should be given the least 3 minutes to provide public comment. Yeah, well, that's an oversight. The 10 should have been in there. Up to
Thank you.
And that's the procedure that they're started back on the 10th. As far as the list of subjects, that was something that the bill writer just suggested that we put in there so that it covered, scope of some curriculum and all that. All them items are curricular things, and the other parts could be the union contracts or, scheduling and things that pertain to the Board of Education.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Palagmatkar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Clark, for the good explanation of the bill. And I apologize right now for the bad background noises. My window is open.
There's no shortage of
I wanted to ask you a question in regards to the provision of the bill about meeting minutes. And you mentioned the intent is to have all of the public testimony that's provided actually fully listed out in the meeting minutes. My understanding under the Open Meeting Act that boards are not required to include that level of detail, especially if their meetings are live streamed and the videos are archived or made publicly available after the fact. Does the board live stream their meetings?
Well, they had been during the COVID things with on Zoom. Yes, they have live streamed their meetings, but they weren't allowing any comments during the Zoom meetings. So there was no way that anybody heard any of the comments because they were only taking the comments by email. And yeah, I would suggest that, by an Open Meeting Act, they're not required. But I would tell you that in the bill, and the reason I say that is having spent 12 years with 5 or 10 minutes of public comment at every government meeting, that if we hadn't recorded or taken minutes of that, the diverting it out to staff to follow up on the comments or the issues that the public has is pretty to try to remember all that stuff, especially when you have multi people speaking. So, I mean, it's just a good practice, and I think a good governmental practice to be able to go back. And address
Hold on one
these
second,
issues.
Delegate Clark. Delegate Clark, hold on one second. Delegate Eversole, if you can hear us, you need to be muted. I can mute you, never mind. All right, Delegate Clark, you can continue.
Yeah, it's just a good practice to be able to go back and refer to the tapes or the minutes to answer the problems and the issues of the public, because that, after all, that's what we're there for, to serve the public, not to necessarily just serve ourselves in the way we think. So I truly believe when people come to a meeting with public comments and issues like that, especially in local government, that you go back and you answer them either by email or have staff personally look into the issue.
And just one brief follow-up question. You mentioned that they've had one meeting now that they've resumed in person. Was that meeting live streamed?
As far as I know, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I also thank you to Delegate Clark. It's good to hear from you. I'm, reading the fiscal note. It appears that much of the custom and policies of the county are kind of being, memorialized in this bill. My only question for you, it appears that there haven't been too many past meetings over the past year that have had more than maybe, 10 or so folks. I think one may have had 20 or so. My question for you is, I'm struggling with the problem that's being solved here. I mean, maybe I'm dense, but I'm still struggling a bit. Would you mind unpacking that a little bit for me?
Well, I think first of all, the issue started to become solved and taken care of when I first looked into it and had conversations with them, and they took it upon themselves, like I said in the beginning, to go ahead and start working on the fact of how to resolve that issue and fix it. My purpose of putting this bill through that says that they must is that I have belief, and I believe the citizens of the county, and for that fact, the citizens of the state, that when you have an entity that's pulling over well over 50% of the county's revenue and a large percentage of money from the state, that public comment is just a good common sense government issue. Instead of saying that it can be temporarily disrupted or suspended, I think that it needs to say that there should be public comment.
Gotcha.
I chose to do that in Calvert County as opposed to say we should do this in the whole state, because I truly believe in local privilege. I mean, local government is closest to the people, and every group of individuals and citizens have their own issues and their own problems that in Southern Maryland may not be the same as in Western Maryland. Baltimore City isn't the same as Leonardtown and St. Mary's County. And so local government needs to be performed the way that takes care of their citizens in the way that they expect it to be done.
I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the Leonardtown Winery. I've had an occasion to visit down in St. Mary's. But I just wanted to also add, just in my quick review, have folks been able to write public comment? They just weren't always able to participate via the Zoom, but they could email, correct? I just want to make sure I'm following.
They could send in an email, but I think what happened there was that it became such an abundance of emails that a lot of people claim they never got any responses. And I don't know that they had dedicated staff to be able to handle that. Like I said earlier, I'm not there to criticize anybody on the school board in the system.
Absolutely.
I just want to make it better as we go forward. And if we ever experience, the Lord help us, that we never do another time where these pandemics, at least not in my lifetime. I mean, hopefully that I'll never see it again, and hopefully you folks won't either. But I just think this is the way that have knowledge of Calvert County, who I've represented from the farthest north point to the farthest southern point over my career, and have done business in every major town center in Calvert County over the years. I have a pretty good read on what the public in Calvert County expects for things to be.
Thank you so much for your indulgence, Delegate. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Delegate Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Delegate Clark.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just had, and I'm reading through everything here, and I don't want to. Some of my colleagues have covered a few of the things I wanted to touch upon, but so in reading everything here, it does look like the Board of Education does have procedures in place for public comments for their meetings, though, right? And this was really just happened around, because I know I hear you. In my county, we all had to shuffle and find new ways to keep everyone safe and still be able to have meetings. But the problem that we're solving really came from the time of the pandemic, or did you notice it later on, sir?
No, actually, before the first of the year, I asked for a copy of their policies and things like this from the superintendent. And with all due respect, I kind of got an answer, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So this
was in December, sir?
It was before, back in prior to the first of the year. I don't remember the exact date. And this had nothing to do with the public comment part. Actually, the paper you have with their policies and procedures, I received that yesterday, along with the letter from the superintendent. So, if I had, I hadn't seen that before. Okay. So, for me to to really digest it, I had to cram it last night. And the part that stuck out to me was the fact that there was an exception in there where it could be temporary, issues could be temporarily suspended for, temporarily, not for a year at a time. And I just want to make sure going, and look, the last year's been crazy. Everybody, we all know that. I mean, this bill is just there to reinforce to the citizens and the public that we understand there should be public comment. We want to be transparent, and they've always been transparent, but to reinstill in the people that are frustrated that they haven't been able to get answers from the Board of Education, or for that matter of fact, the Board of County Commissioners, that we're putting things in place to make sure the next time this works better for everybody.
I understand. Thank you, Mr. Clark. But they do have an existing public space comment. But my question to you was, they did read emails aloud over so that folks could have their public comment heard. Isn't that true? Did they read emails? Am I reading that right?
That was
Delegate, hey, let me hop in here. Delegate, I think you answered that question earlier.
Okay, because I was trying to follow along and I didn't hear that. I apologize, Vice Chair.
Yeah, he said that there was some that sometimes they read it, sometimes they did not. All comments were read. So that was their response. You got another question, Delegate?
I wanted to say thank you again, because I know that this was a shuffle in our county as well, and multiple different communities. So I understand that during the pandemic, this has been incredibly hard on so many. So thanks again for letting me ask those questions and try to put those lines together.
Thank you very much for the questions. And just always remember, Calvert County is a very small county, 93,000 people. So if you were representing Calvert County and you go in the grocery store, everybody knows you.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Delegate Patterson.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and greetings. My name is the Maryland Delegate Clark.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you. For full disclosure, I served on Charles County's board for 12 years, Board of Education. And so, I know that you also believe in autonomy of board members with Board of Education. And so my question is, did the board, before the COVID, before this pandemic, and we know that next month, I believe that board is going to open up and resume, but did the board offer unlimited in-person public comments before COVID? And that's what's driving you to propose this legislation?
Yes, they did. And they started back in face-to-face meetings on March the 11th. Okay. And public comment up to 10 people, and they had about 8, I believe, on March the 11th. The ultimate reason, like I said earlier, the ultimate reason that I wanted to put the legislation in is because I received so many comments from constituents and people calling me up or having Zoom meetings with me, complaining that there wasn't any public comment, that all they could do was email questions in and they'd get an answer maybe a month later or not at all. And the purpose of the bill is twofold: to instill confidence back into the Board of Education, because there's a lot of folks out there that were upset and flustered that they couldn't get their answer. We have a good Board of Education. We have a good school system in Calvert County. This bill is a win-win for everybody. It shows that the school, and for the life of me, I can't understand why the school board or the superintendent would write a letter against it. For the simple fact is, everybody agrees there should be public comment. Okay, there was a hiccup during COVID. Okay, that in every county probably, and it frustrated the constituents. Okay. By putting this bill in, it shows that government as a whole understand the frustration of the citizens, and that we are memorializing the fact that there must be public comment going forward in case there's ever another episode like this, that we'll look at that right away.
Okay, Delegate Clark, my quick just yes or no. Do you believe in the autonomy of school boards?
Yes, I do. I do autonomy. Yes, and I tell people all the time. I said the school board is unto itself. The only influence that elected officials have on the school board and the school system is money.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Last question, Delegate Shoemaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Delegate Clark, I mean, if this session has shown anything, is that we seem to pick and choose when local courtesy applies down here. This is a bill specifically for your county, as I understand it, right?
Correct, but we have a split in the delegation as to for the bill or against the bill. And like I said earlier, it saddens me and upsets me that this has happened because the school board is a nonpartisan elected board.
Okay.
Now what we've had is a split between the two parties in the direction of the board. And this, nobody will ever convince me that this isn't a win-win for the school board and for every elected official that serve in Calvert County.
So, I mean, Delegate Clark, I mean, we hear a lot down here about transparency and promoting the interests of transparency. As I understand it, the premise behind your bill is specifically intended to give the public access to an entity, the Board of Education, which spends a bunch of money. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir, a bunch of money, yes.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. I wish I had a bunch of money. All right. Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Delegate Clark, thank you. And to the members of the committee, that concludes our public hearing for today.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take any announcement from subcommittee chairs. I'll go first since I'm on. We'll be meeting at 4:15 today to take up 2 bills, not 3 bills, as I alluded to earlier. Any other subcommittee chairs want to make any announcement?
Early childhood's awesome. We have no bills left to do right now.
Congratulations. All right, anybody else? Delegate Wilkins. Delegate Barnes. I don't see Delegate Barnes on there. Okay, we do have a voting session today, everyone. That voting session should be at
45.
3:45. Yep, 3:45. Thank you, Delegate. It's at 3:45 today. I'll see everyone there.